Have you ever thought about how the human population grew if Adam and Eve only had sons? Because the Bible only clearly mentions three names: Cain, Abel, and Seth. But the mystery here is who became Cain's wife and where did Seth's wife come from? There's an even more surprising detail, because it says in Genesis that Adam had other sons and daughters, but not even one woman's name was mentioned. No story, no identity. It's like they were erased from history. This is where the big question begins. Were there other people outside of Eden? And if Adam really had daughters, why don't we know even a single one of them? We're going to discuss another unusual topic today. In this video, join us as we uncover this mystery. This is a part of human history that is rarely talked about. It is also included in a lost chapter from the earliest days of mankind. But before we begin, don't forget to like this video. This means a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much, and now let's get started. When Adam and Eve were banished from Eden, it wasn't just like they lost their home. They also lost their closeness to God and the peaceful life they once enjoyed. They walked eastward into a rocky, rough, and unfamiliar land. There, they began to live again as people who learned to survive through hardship, and there their first children were born. According to Genesis chapter 5, Adam had more sons and daughters. After Seth was born, that means Adam and Eve didn't have just 3 children. They had many more. There were also daughters whose names were not mentioned. But in the story, the focus is only on the 3 sons: Cain, Abel, and Seth. Cain was the first person born outside of Eden. As the eldest, he felt the weight of responsibility. It was as if he should be ahead of everyone. Abel came next. They were brothers, but their personalities were different from childhood. Cain became a farmer. Every day on the land, the work was hard, and his hands were always rough. Abel, on the other hand, was a shepherd, with the sheep far from the noise, and with a peace that Cain could not understand. And from there, little by little, jealousy began to build up in Cain's heart. One day, the brothers made an offering to God. Cain brought the fruits of the land, the product of his hard work. Abel offered the firstborn of his sheep, the best from his flock. God looked at their offerings. He accepted Abel's, but he did not accept Cain's. And that's when Cain felt hurt. The pain was deeper than he thought. It was as if he was shattered in that moment. So God spoke to him. "Why are you angry? If you do what is right, you will be accepted. But if you don't, sin is crouching at your door. This is a warning, and it's a chance to change," but Cain didn't listen to it. The next day, Cain approached Abel. "Come, let's go to the field." Abel went along as before without doubt. But when they reached the middle of the field, everything suddenly changed. Cain quickly picked up a stone, and with all his strength, he struck his brother's head. The breath was gone. That was when the first blood in human history was spilled. The first death. Not because of illness, not an accident, but because of envy, anger, and hatred. Again, God spoke, "Where is your brother Abel?" But Cain answered coldly, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" A lie that hurts even more than what he did. Because he didn't just deny the crime, he also refused the responsibility. And God said, "What have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground against you." And there, the judgment was given. A curse that would change Cain's fate for the rest of his life. At that very moment, Cain's life changed completely. The land he used to work on suddenly stopped bearing fruit. It felt like the world had shut him out. But what happened next was even more shocking. Cain shouted, almost in desperation, "You're driving him away." And here the big question arises. Who? If the story clearly says that only Adam, Eve, and Cain himself were alive at that time. Who was he afraid of? That line is like a doorway to a mystery. Maybe Cain knew there were other people in the world. Or maybe God showed him that the human race would multiply. Whatever the reason, Cain's fear was real, and we can feel that. But God didn't let him die. Instead, he gave him a mark that would make anyone who tried to herd him back off. The Bible doesn't say exactly what it looked like. We don't know if it was something visible, purely spiritual, or had a symbolic meaning. What's clear is that it was enough to keep anyone from daring to harm Cain. So he left. He went away from the presence of God, literally, and from then on his life was not, resting under the direct guidance of the Creator. He traveled eastward to a place called Nod, which means wandering. And there, in the land full of exile and loneliness, something unexpected happened. Cain took a wife. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son whom he named Enoch. And as the child grew, Cain began to build a small city. And he also named it Enoch in honor of his son. But again, there is a question. When it appeared, where did Cain's wife come from if only Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel, and Seth had been mentioned? Many explanations are offered by scholars, but there is one answer that is closest to the biblical context. It is highly likely that Cain's wife was one of his sisters. Nowadays, we might feel uncomfortable about this, but before the laws about marriage and family were established, there were no prohibitions yet. From the very beginning, humanity came from just one married couple. That's why marriage between siblings or cousins was part of how people multiplied in the first generation. And remember, people lived very long lives back then. Adam lived up to 930 years. This means that with so many people, they could have had a lot of children, both sons and daughters, who were not named one by one in the Bible. So it's possible that Cain's wife was a younger sister or even a niece. At that time, that was the only natural way for people to multiply. And Cain wasn't the only one with this kind of story. Throughout the Old Testament, we can see that even the well-known patriarchs also married close relatives. Abraham married Sarah, who was his half-sister. Isaac married Rebekah, the daughter of his cousin. And Jacob, Abraham's grandson, married Leah and Rachel, the daughters of his uncle Laban. As time passed, we can see that almost all of the first people in the Bible married within their own family. Without these marriages, the nation of Israel would not have been formed in the generations to come. So it's natural to ask if the explanation is that simple. Why didn't the Bible directly say that Cain married his sister? Why is it silent on that part? When it's very detailed when it comes to age, names, and the complete list of descendants. This is where another theory comes in. It's more controversial, heavier, and more people are curious about it. What if God created other people besides Adam and Eve? At first glance, this idea seems radical. It's not explicitly written in the Bible, but there are people who ask this because of the gaps in the story. After Cain killed Abel, God said that he would become a wanderer on the earth. And that's when Cain answered, very afraid. If someone sees me, they will kill me. But who? If it was only them that were mentioned, and not just that, in the land of Nod, Cain got married, had a son named Enoch, and even built a city. And a city is not built for just 3 people. You need many families, workers, and an entire community to build it. That's why some people think that maybe the story of Adam and Eve isn't the story of the whole world, but just the story of a chosen family. It's possible that while God was creating paradise for the first couple, there were other groups of people in different places that were not recorded in the scriptures. There's an emerging idea from Genesis 1 that says God created mankind in his own image. It seems like a broad statement about humanity, not just about a single couple in Eden. That's why some believe that there might have been other people outside the garden, and that's where Cain found his wife. If that's the case, it's possible that the city Cain built was filled with people who didn't come from the lineage of Adam and Eve. But here's where a major problem arises. This goes against one of the most important teachings of the Christian faith, that all people come from a single origin. According to Apostle Pablo, from one man he made all nations. If there were 2 separate origins of people, one from Adam and Eve and another from a different group, there would be a major rift in the entire story of the Bible. So there would be people who did not come from Adam, so they would not inherit his sin. If that's the case, they wouldn't need a savior, And if there is such a group, the very foundation of the story of sin and salvation all the way to the cross of Christ would be broken. Because of this, most churches and Christian traditions reject this theory. For them, God's entire plan would be ruined if there was another line of people not connected to Kaya. Until now, all explanations come from only two major possibilities. First, Cain's wife was one of the daughters of Adam and Eve. Second, there were other people outside of Eden. This is an idea that tries to answer questions, but it goes against the main teachings of the faith. There's a third explanation that has been around for a long time, not from the Bible itself, but from an ancient book that's on the fringes of the history of faith. And for some, this might be the key to the mystery of who Cain's wife really was. This is the book of Jubilees, an ancient writing that was written in the 2nd century before Christ. It's not a lost book, it's just that it wasn't included in the official canon of the Bible. It's also called the Lesser Genesis because it repeats the early stories in Genesis, but with additional details that aren't found in the traditional version. And here, it explicitly states what the Bible did not mention, that Adam and Eve had daughters. Not only were they mentioned, but their names were also listed. According to the book of Jubilees, Cain's wife was called Awan, the daughter of Adam and Eve. Yes, in this ancient book, it is clearly stated that Cain married his own sister, and Awan was not the only one. Azura was also mentioned here, another daughter of Adam and Eve who was given as a wife to Seth, the third son mentioned in Genesis. In this way, the earliest family structure appears: Cain and Awan, Seth and Azura, and the book does not just provide a story. Even the exact timeline of everything was reported using a unique measurement of time, the Jubilee. In this ancient calendar, one Jubilee is equivalent to 49 years, and every birth and event was recorded using it. Everything had an exact year. Nothing was considered an accident. According to the record, Cain was born in the first year of the third Jubilee, which is equivalent to 130 years after the beginning of creation. He was the very first child born outside of paradise, the first to grow up without ever seeing Eden. After 2 years, Abel was born, and after a long period of mourning because of his death, Seth came, born in the first year of the fourth Jubilee, or in our years, year 113. Seth became the symbol of new hope in place of the lost child. Even the daughters were also recorded. The birth of Awan, who would become Cain's wife, was placed in the 7th year of the third Jubilee. So it turns out that there was a 6-year age gap between the siblings. She was the very first woman named in the book, and according to it, she was given to Cain as his wife. The name Awan also has a meaning in the ancient Hebrew language. It can refer to sorrow, sin, or vanity. But it also has other meanings: desire, lust, or strength. They say this is not an accident. It's like combining the weight of Cain's sin and the hope of continuing life. According to the book of Jubilees, Cain was 40 years old when he was with Awan. This happened in the land of Nod, the place of wandering that was given to him as punishment. There in the land marked by a curse, Awan conceived and gave birth to Enoch, and there they also built a city which they named after their son. In this story, Awan is the woman who brought life out of Eden, who became the way for the lineage to continue even though it was tainted by the curse and sin of their origin. There is another daughter of Adam and Eve who is not often talked about: Azura. According to the book of Jubilees, she played a key role in early human history. According to the ancient book, Azura was born in the 3rd year of the 5th Jubilee, or in our years, 197. After Mulan started creating. Because of this, it was impossible for Abel and Azura to meet, since Abel was killed before the year 190. But here the story becomes different. According to the book of Jubilees, Adam and Eve mourned Abel's death for 4 weeks of years, which means 4 cycles of 7 years. After a long period of mourning, Seth was born, and according to the book, Azura, Seth's sister, had long been destined to be Abel's wife. When Abel died before her birth, their destined union ended early. So when Seth grew up, Azura was given to him as his wife instead of to Abel. And from their union, Enosh was born, who would become the beginning of a new chapter in humanity's faith. In this story, Azura is not just a character. She is considered part of the righteous family line, the branch of the lineage that will open a new beginning in God's plan for humanity. Even her name, Azura, has a symbol. It's linked to the sky's color and to lapis lazuli, a prized ancient gemstone. It symbolizes purity, truth, and closeness to God. In Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt, lapis lazuli was used in crowns and sacred objects. They called it the stone of heaven, and that's exactly what Azura means in the story. A reminder that even if people stray because of sin, there is still a path back to God. When Enosh was born, something new happened that hadn't appeared even in the time of Adam and Cain. Genesis says in a short but very powerful sentence, that was when people began to call on the name of the Lord. For the first time, people understood that land, food, or even their own children were not enough. They needed the Creator. They needed the God who formed them from dust. This is where worship began. People began to pray. They composed and raised songs and words, not for themselves anymore, but for heaven. Enosh may not have been as famous as Adam, Cain, or Noah, but in his time, the hearts of people began to awaken. Under his leadership, humanity first returned to God through prayer, worship, and the recognition that they could not live on their own. And here, the first two branches of humanity were divided. The line of Cain was marked by separation and wandering, while the line of Seth and Azura represented hope and redemption. From Enosh, a quiet but powerful lineage gradually formed, the line of Seth. From here came Nachanan, then Mahalalel, and from Mahalalel Jared was born. And in the time of Jared, a very mysterious man was born, Enoch. He is the man who would be described after many centuries in a simple sentence. Enoch walked with God, and because he was so close to the Creator, he did not experience death. God brought him to heaven, but the path was set before Enoch arrived. In this family, they don't just teach planting and taking care of animals. They were also taught God's commandments, even before the 10 Commandments were written on Mount Sinai. According to the book of Jubilees, it was Adam himself who started passing down these teachings. The Sabbath, the holy days, the laws about purity, justice, and holy fear of God. This is more than a ritual. It's a living covenant handed down from father to son through generations. While the descendants of Cain are busy building cities, making weapons, and inventing instruments, the line of Seth is creating a different kind of wealth, a living memory focused on God. In those times, people lived very long lives. They don't just see their children grow up. They see their grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren. Adam lived 930 years. Methuselah, the oldest of them all, lived up to 969 years. During that very long period, they repeatedly told the story of Eden, the fall of man, and the hope that one day what was lost would be restored. They mentioned it over and over every night. They repeated it every time the sun rose. So even though sin spread, there were still a few families who remained. They were few, but they did not let go of God. While other people chose power, violence, and their own desires, the descendants of Seth remained steadfast, a small light in a world drifting farther and farther from the Creator. And the lineage continued. Jared became the father of Enoch. Enoch then became the father of Methuselah. As the line of Seth continued, a new generation gradually emerged. Methuselah became the father of Lamech, and from Lamech, Noah would be born. But before Noah came, something unusual happened. A tragedy that completely destroyed the balance of the world. Over time, Seth's sons began falling into temptation. In ancient texts, they are called the sons of God. These people grew up fearing God and were taught to live rightly, but they were drawn to the daughters of men. These women came from the line of Cain and grew up in a culture of power, desire, and pride. They weren't supposed to mix, but they chose the easier path. They married these women and followed a life far from God. From this union, giants called Nephilim were born, beings known for their size, strength, and violence. In Hebrew, the word Nephilim means the fallen ones, because they were people who chose to rebel and spread terror. They weren't just skilled in battle, they were violent leaders. And this is where the world began to worsen. As the population grew, the book of Jubilees says that some beings from heaven saw how beautiful the women on earth were. In a year of a particular Jubilee, an ancient system of counting time, they came down and chose whichever women they wanted. These women gave birth to giants, who were bigger, more violent, and more corrupt than ordinary people. From there, evil spread and destroyed order. Humans, animals, and nature were thrown into chaos. Animals killed each other, people were in turmoil, and the land was filled with violence. But there was an even darker secret. According to the book of Enoch, it wasn't just humans who crossed the boundaries. There was a group of angels called the Watchers who came down from heaven and took human women as their wives. They revealed knowledge humans weren't meant to have. Magic, sorcery, alchemy, astrology, and techniques for making weapons. They taught humanity secrets that made the human heart even more corrupt. In return, they fathered beings that were not truly human, hybrids, violent and corrupt, and they spread chaos throughout the world. And according to the book of Jubilees, because of the Watchers' disobedience, the world became completely filled with evil. During this time, Noah was born, who would become humanity's last hope before the great judgment came. The world was slowly worsening. The giant beings born from the wrong unions were eating human food, destroying people, and as if that wasn't enough, they even killed each other. Evil spread quickly. The righteous almost disappeared, and the holy lineage of Seth gradually vanished because of their own disobedience. Throughout the land, violence prevailed. According to the book of Jubilees, an ancient book that also tells stories of early times, sin increased on the earth. There was no remorse for the shedding of blood. Women were being abused. Evil spirits were being summoned, and even tools were no longer used for farming, but for harming others. And this is where the accounts of Jubilees and Genesis meet. Both of them describe the moment when God saw the true condition of the world. The human heart was full of evil, and people thought of nothing but doing wrong. The very earth seemed to groan under the weight of sin. God himself, who created man, was hurt by what had become of his creation. According to Genesis, the Lord regretted that he had made man, and his heart was filled with sorrow. The world was on the brink of moral collapse, and here God pronounced judgment. I will wipe mankind, whom I have created, from the face of the earth. But in the midst of darkness, there was one who remained, a righteous man, Noah. Not because he was perfect, but because even when sin flooded the world around him, he remained faithful. He lived amidst the filth of the world. But he was not tainted, and because of him, humanity was not completely wiped out. God does not desire to take lives. He desires restoration. That's why he chose Noah to start again. According to the book of Jubilees, Noah kept the ancient commandments that were first given to Adam in Eden. Holy laws, memories from a time when humans were still close to God. Noah had no ambition to rule or conquer. He only wanted to obey, but he was not blind. He saw the cities destroyed by sin, the fields full of corpses, and the markets where souls were treated like mere products. Every night he knelt and wept because he knew something was coming, until one day God spoke and commanded him to build an ark. He didn't fully understand, but he obeyed right away. He worked for 100 years with his own hands. While people laughed at him and belittled what he was doing, the flood was not just a judgment. It was a new beginning, a new Genesis, a new birth for the earth. Through it, the ancient race of the righteous was saved. The descendants of Azura and Seth, Enosh and Jared, Enoch and Methuselah. Noah was the last witness of the old world and the first witness of the new world that would be born. It was not out of anger that God decided, but because he wanted to save man from his own fate. And from the ark, everything began again. While the book of Genesis is full of men's names, have you noticed how silent the Bible is about women? But without them, nothing would grow, nothing would continue, and there would be no next generation. When Cain was banished, he was not alone. Beside him was Awan, a woman who did not kill, but was punished along with him. She gave birth to Enoch, the first child born outside the presence of God, and she became the mother of a lineage that grew up in hiding. Meanwhile, Azura, their sibling and the wife of Seth, carried the promised lineage. Enoch descended from her. And when Enoch came, people remembered once again that they could still call upon God. This is where prayer was revived. These women, almost erased from the genealogies, are the true roots of why the story of humanity continued, and they are not alone. Sinama, Noah's wife, crossed the flood with him. Sarah, Abraham's wife, became the mother of a woman. Rebekah, Leah, and Rachel gave birth to the tribes of Israel, creating an entire nation. Even though they are rarely mentioned in the actual list of names, they were quietly placed in the background. But they were the ones who preserved the lineage, the hope, and God's plan. Because when man fell, God did not just raise up a man, he raised up a family. And in the midst of a world filled with blood and chaos, they sparked a new beginning. Women from Eden, mothers drawn from the dust, keepers of a promise that had not yet been written in those times. And here we will understand it better. God's plan is perfect, broader, deeper, and higher than we can imagine. We humans want direct and complete answers, but God does not move according to our desires. He sees farther. He understands more broadly. The Bible says, this is a reminder that there are things we really cannot fully understand, but God does not require perfect understanding. What he asks for is trust. Walk with him even when the path isn't clear. Seek his presence even when we can't see the whole picture. That's why he left us the Bible. Not to answer every question, but to show us what matters most. The plan of salvation, God's love, and his desire to be with us, generation after generation. Even when some details don't seem to fit in our minds, trust is enough. So now it's your turn to choose. Who do you think became Cain's wife? Was it one of Adam and Eve's daughters? Which of the three stories makes more sense to you?